So now we're going to take a look at what destructive conflict looks like, or what a typical pathway might be like. And you have a model for this in your book, so if you want, please turn to section 5.3, and we'll kind of tease out what it looks like. So, typically speaking, destructive conflict will start with some form of criticism or some harsh words spoken. Research shows that more often than not, this usually is started by the woman in the relationship, but not always.
Definitely not always, guys. We're not letting you off the hook. But what happens when a guy gets attacked? I mean, it's just natural. Football field, basketball. Guy comes at you. Hey, we get defensive. For guys, we think that's de-escalating the conflict. That's what we naturally do. But to a woman, that's an act of aggression. So we have to retune our thoughts when we're talking to our mates with that.
So once you receive that kind of a defensive response, contempt can set in, where you feel devalued, you feel disrespected. And then
you start getting emotional. Not just women, but guys all. We get emotional. Our heart rate goes up. Our pulse gets in. We get that fight or flight thing. We get all revved up. We get ready to escalate something, and then we're ready to engage.
So once you've processed through all of that, and that is exhausting, you kind of get to that place where despair just kind of sets in. You start to feel distance between you and your spouse. You really start to develop the desire to just get away. Isolation sounds much better than being in the company of this other person. Periods of silence occur. And none of this is productive or constructive for finding a resolution to whatever brought you to that point. In fact, it does quite the opposite. And Randy and I, unfortunately, have some experience in this. And we'd like to share a little bit of our story with you on how we ended up on the path to Egypt.
Road to hell.
So, Randy and I worked at the same company together, but we didn't work together. And I went to work one day to drum up some support for an initiative that Crossroads was doing. They wanted to build a freestanding health clinic in South Africa, and I'm a nurse, and I work with a lot of great healthcare workers, so I thought maybe I could find some people, not necessarily people that went to Crossroads, but just people in general that might have interest in this. So Randy, through the grapevine, found out about it, and he inquired via email to me. And we exchanged some emails. He was asking a few questions about Crossroads. And eventually I just said, well, shoot, if you ever want to come to church, I'm happy to meet you in the atrium and you can sit with me sometime. I usually go on Saturday nights. And so at some point later, he met me and my kids, and we'd go to church every Saturday night, and then part ways, and you'd go do whatever you did, and I'd go home with my kids. And eventually, last Wednesday service came around, and for some reason my kids were tied up and couldn't go, and it was just Randy and I, and he asked me if I wanted to go to dinner afterwards, and I said yes.
And like all guys, when she said yes, I knew she wanted you bad. The chemistry was there. Flood of emotions. But we sat out and we went out to eat, and the next thing we knew it was 11 o'clock. And I don't do that on a work night. I get up at like 5:30. Karen doesn't either. But I found out we had a lot in common. We both were youth counselors at a Methodist church. I was at Anderson Hills. She was at Milford first. We've both been on mission trips. We both like to run. We're both runners. We still run together. We both like to bike and kayak. Neither one of us like to sit around very much. We were both crazy about March Madness. She roots for a losing team, but that's okay. We loved all that stuff. And basically, we just love to play, and we really did that real well. You wanted me, didn't you?
Well, anyway, dating was our Eden, as you can tell. It was a blast. I had so much fun with Randy, and he was such a good guy. And like he said, we played so well together. So early in that part of the time where I would like define we were actually dating, because meeting him at church for all those weeks was, I'm not sure what you'd call that, but once we knew we were like kind of really dating, I asked him to pray with me one night before we were parting ways. And I did that because when I was double dipping at church. I was coming here on Saturday nights and going to my Methodist church on Sunday mornings and working with the youth group there and whatnot. But the couples I worked with in the youth group, they all had that common thread of praying together as a couple. And they had such cool, great marriages that I knew that that was something that I wanted with a person that I was going to be spending a lot of time with. So I asked Randy if he would pray with me, and
I was shocked. In fact, I would have been less shocked if you had said, "You want to get naked in a bubble bath?" But I said yes. And the thing is, I had actually never prayed with my spouse before. In fact, I flunked public prayer. I did it with my youth praise band, but only because I really had to. But I said yes, and not only that, we decided at that point, and I think I might have even brought it up, that every time we left each other, because we kind of were quasi-dating at that time, that we would pray before we left each other, and I would go home. And we did that faithfully. Yeah.
So eventually, Randy asked me to marry him. And we knew getting married would be an adjustment on our kids. Our kids we weren't really worrying so much about like sharing weekends and all that kind of stuff. They were older, but we knew that was going to be an adjustment. But we never expected Randy's job to take such like a crazy turn right about the time we were getting married.
30 days before we got married, I'm a physician. My partner comes in and says, "I quit. I am like, I've got some health problems." I'm in a large group, but I work with 2 other people very closely. Average oncologist sees about 6,500 patients a year. I was already seeing in excess of 10,000. In fact, all 3 of us were. One guy left. Those 30,000 patients, they didn't leave, they stayed. So now instead of one person seeing 10,000, we have 2 of us seeing 15,000 a year, which was just taxing. I went from 50 hours a week to probably 70 to 80. I went from a call perspective of every 6th weekend to about every 4th to 5th, every weeknight call from every 16th weeknight for some restructuring issues down to about every 5th or 6th. So I was just gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, neither one of us grew up wanting to be a divorced person. That just wasn't really something that we thought in our first marriages was an option, but that's the way life took us. So we both felt badly about that legacy of divorce for our kids, and we knew getting married was really going to be a benefit for us. I mean, that was something we were choosing, maybe not something that our kids would have chosen. Although the kids all got along and were supportive of it, there's a lot of blending of family traditions and stuff like that can be difficult and hurtful. So after we were married, we went on a unintentional honeymoon to Egypt. And I say that not literally, I say that figuratively. Because in addition to Randy's like crazy changing job demands, which really were unexpected and tough, we worked really hard at like blending this family that we had. So we made a point of visiting our 6 kids that were out of town, all of them. I mean, we found ourselves in Atlanta, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Chicago, New York City, Indianapolis, multiple times.
And then the summer after we got married, we relocated all 6 kids, and that was like crazy. And one of mine got married in that summer as well. It was a daughter, and just to give you a little perspective, the 3 of my 4 that are married, they got married within 12 months of each other, and 2 of them were daughters, so we planned 2 full weddings, and then one, out-of-town rehearsal dinner. But we were nuts.
I'd suggest that we draw straws the following year and only keep 3 kids per year.
So, as you can see, we were really trying to like invest in our family, and we were trying to juggle Randy's like crazy changing job situation. And we were that couple that like loved to play together. I mean, that's what we did. Quality time is a love language we both share, and our quality time that used to be so rich, we somehow had just kind of whittled it down to almost not being existent. I think we kind of became yes men. If somebody needed us, boy, like we were right there. Or if somebody just wanted to do something fun and we might have planned like a special date, we were like, oh, we probably should. So we'd go. And next thing we know,
Our quality time started at 11 p.m., and I mean that literally. That's when we saw each other.
yeah, we did a really poor job of protecting boundaries for our time to just connect.
Took care of everybody else but ourselves, basically.
Yeah.
And with that, one of the things you have to figure out is how you feel about things and how your partner feels. Paul told me something last night. I can't tell you how Karen feels. Karen has to tell you that. Your partner's got to tell you. So in table exercise number 2, section 5.8, we'll spend about 20 minutes. We want you as an individual to fill out this form. And it's going to talk about how you feel during conflict. And it might take about 5 minutes to fill that out. And share it with your spouse. That way your spouse knows how you feel and how they feel. And then you can, if there's time left, talk about it amongst your table.
And it's important to remember what we want you to do is think about a conflict that you've recently had and focus on that particular conflict and your feelings in that particular moment. So you and your spouse are both talking about the same thing. That'll make the exercise really rich.